Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to introduce our first longer presentation. So these are 20-minute presentations with some time left over in afterwards for questions. Um, so our first presenter, Amanda Harrison? I see you.
Hi.
Hi, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah. Let's see. All right. You see everything okay?
Looks great, and we can hear you well. So I'm just going to quickly introduce you. Amanda Harrison is an assistant professor at the University of Central Missouri in the Educational Technology and Library Sciences Department. And as you can see, her session is integrating global and cross-cultural awareness into information literacy skills for K through 12 students. And just a reminder, we will have time at the end for questions, but if you would like to put questions in the chat, you can put a Q and then a dash before your question, and then we will go through those when we have time at the end. So
All
Amanda,
right.
feel free to take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you to everyone who created this conference. This is exciting to be here. Actually, as I was doing some research for this presentation, I ran across some videos from last year's Lilly conference, which I'd not heard of before. So it was just kind of a fun irony that um, coming full circle to today. So, as she mentioned, I work as an assistant professor at the University of Central Missouri. Before I did that, I did work as a school librarian with K-12 students for about 13 years. So that's kind of my perspective coming into this. But I see a lot of people are here that work in different kinds of libraries, and I think that what I want to talk about will be applicable to many kinds of young people, not just K-12 students. So hopefully it'll be interesting for you as well. I do have my QR code here. If anybody wants the slides, you can snag those. I'll have it at the end too. I just have a few links to things that if you want access to them, you're welcome to have those. So information literacy, I want to just kind of start with a quote that set the stage for information literacy is not just something that we want to teach students that they can do, in their own, like in formal research or library research or, in school, but something that takes them throughout their whole life, which, we know as librarians, like information literacy affects your whole life, but I think we just can't say it enough to our students and patrons as well. So I thought this was a nice quote from UNESCO. Um, our standards that I wanted to really focus on for this presentation come from ISTE and AASL, and they set the stage for kind of how we want students to be thinking as they're participating in a global learning community, um, but also how they're thinking about that information, taking it, and then using it to collaborate and share their own information as well. So we have the other ISTE and AASL standards, and then they get just a little bit more specific in terms of thinking, how students should be thinking and how they should be collaborating with others. And if you have the slides, those do link to those standards. So for this presentation, I really wanted to focus specifically on connecting with young people. What is it that is the information context for young people today? How can we use that context as we're informing and teaching them about information literacy skills? How can we use that information to engage them with their global community? And then finally, of course, our young people are going to be those ones that are shaping the future of information and information literacy. So how can we use this kind of information to empower them in their own lives, but also in the global world? So connecting. When I teach my inquiry classes, we talk about this concept from guided inquiry of the third space. So that idea that We have this curriculum that our teachers want to teach. We have these skills that we want them to know. But sometimes it seems a little bit divorced from their regular world. So they have their interests and their ideas over here. We have the curriculum we want to teach them. Where can we find some common ground so that they can make those connections? And I wanted to start here because I think it's important to consider that we don't just want this third space to be here so that we can keep students' interest. Of course, we want to keep students' interest as we're engaging them with inquiry, as we're engaging them with information literacy skills. But we also want them to see the connection between how they're using their information literacy skills here in the curriculum and in that formal research, and how the information seeking that they're doing in their own lives connect. So connecting in both of those ways, both for interest and just for general use. So what is this information context for Gen Z and Gen Alpha? Well, a lot of it's YouTubers, a lot of it's social media influencers. If you have any work with kids or you have kids at home, you know that they have these people that they follow and engage with. And in many ways, this is really powerful. I mean, they have, you know, the ability to engage with all these different people that are all around the world. But as one parent said, I saw in a social media post this week, you hand a kid a book, you know what they're going to get. You hand them a TV show and you know that there's kind of a theme and a script. When you hand them YouTube, you never know what's going to come out. So this obviously creates a big challenge for librarians and educators who are trying to help students understand what kinds of information they're getting from these influencers and how it is impacting their life. You've probably seen some of these headlines about social media being the new Google. And this isn't just, our K-12 students, right? This is a lot of people moving from traditional search engines into social media, and how that's impacting their information searching behaviors. So you can kind of go down a rabbit hole there. And when I first read this, I thought, really? Like, is that how people are searching for information now? But I really had to think about what is this difference between what we consider in the library world as these formal research skills versus information and informal information seeking behaviors. And if you go to the Nielsen Norman group, which is linked here, they have a ton of articles about how information seeking is changing and not just kids, but kids and adults, teens, all of the above, that are really interesting in terms of what it is that people are looking for. And the one thing that stood out to me that I hadn't read as much about in the library world was this idea of the passive information gain, that, a lot of times we aren't really information seeking. And I think that's where a little bit where our disconnect comes when we're trying to teach these behaviors, is that a lot of times we're just on the internet. We're just on social media. We're not really searching for anything except maybe entertainment, but we're still passively taking in information. So helping students see that there isn't just a connection between that formal research, that informal research, but there's also a connection between the information they're just getting when they're just spending time online. So our passive information gain, I wanted to connect it to this concept of the mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors that we're getting from fiction books, because I think, again, this is one of those things that as librarians, we know that when kids are reading fiction and they're reading stories, they're still getting information. They're still getting mirrors to their lives. They're still using them as windows. But I would argue that that is the case for other types of information gain as well, including social media, TikTok videos. I mean, if you've ever been on social media and somebody said something and you're just like, oh, yes, like I felt that, like that was like how I've been feeling and no one has said it. Like that kind of connection is really very similar. So I think we need to really make that clear to our students and patrons that that is still a type of information. Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is it some sort of amalgamation between the two? Probably. Um, but helping them have the metacognitive skills to recognize that is really important. So how are we going to do that? I think part of it is just informing them about some of the background skills and how those skills relate to those information seeking and the passive information gain. So even though I'm focused on K-12 and I still wanted to bring the ACRL information literacy framework up because I just love the way it's set up because it really highlights what it is that we need our students to know. And of course, our younger students are not going to understand all these concepts at the same level, but they can still get little pieces of them and start to build that process, knowing that this is where we want them to be as they grow into adulthood. So one of the ways that we can work with our students and help them better understand these ideas is through just the typical one-shot lessons that a lot of us are already doing in libraries. But taking those lessons and comparing and contrasting that formal and informal research, and again, that passive information. So not just, how do algorithms work when you're doing formal library research, but how do they work when you're in social media? How do they work when you're in Google? How do they work when you're in a database? Because there's kind of there's some similarities, there's some differences. But I think if you start to make those clear to students, how they compare and contrast, it will be easier for them to see the connection between formal and informal types of research. Again, AI may not be, huge in databases yet, but it's getting there. So I'm glad to see some people are talking about that later today. How can we compare and contrast their experiences with AI in social media, their experiences with it in Google, and their experiences with it in formal research? And that doesn't necessarily have to be the entirety of the lesson, but if you set that stage, they're going to start making those comparisons and they're understanding that information seeking is in all of those areas. It's important to know, though, that when we are doing formal research, we are valuing a different type of knowledge than our students are looking for when they're looking for information on social media. Now, that isn't the case all the time, but we need to really make it clear for our students that rational objective knowledge, like scientific knowledge, is a different kind of concept than experiential knowledge. That they see on social media. So if they're looking for someone's experience at a local restaurant, somebody's experience of living with a disability, that is a different type of knowledge that's still valuable. It's just different. And I think we need to make that clear for our students as we are teaching them the differences between different types of research. I'm not going to go into all the meta literacy domains here just for time, but there is a link here if you're interested in looking at different kinds of domains. It's just a different way of thinking about what types of things that students need to know as they're doing information literacy so that it takes it beyond the skill base into something that they can take with them and use in different kinds of contexts. But then we can also go into, very specifically different YouTubers they follow, different influencers they follow, and look at the different types of knowledge that those individuals are sharing in their videos and what they're posting. Mark Rober is a good example. He definitely has that authority of, being a NASA engineer, but he's also approaching his videos and the things he's sharing in a certain kind of way that mirrors his scientific background. So we can kind of share that with students and say, how is what he's sharing different, or how does it differ from other kinds of videos that you may have seen about this content? So that one would be a good one to share with students that they may have already probably heard about. Sorry, let me just take a quick drink of water. I wanted to share this slide because I felt like a lot of the things I was sharing and the concepts about metacognition are something that we think of for our older students that's maybe not as relevant for our younger ones. Um, but I think we can still take those concepts down and start setting the stage for our youngest kiddos because they are still online. They are still being influenced by different people. And it's important for them, I think, to see who is it that is behind some of these different videos, that is behind what they are engaging with. And I mean, for our youngest, that might literally be, watching some of the kids' videos and saying, how did they end up making videos to go online? Why are they showing themselves playing at a playground? What is it that their family set that up? Now, I will say, definitely if you are in education and you want to do some think alouds and talk through some of these things with students or research the backgrounds of influencers, do your pre-research. You're not always going to find that they have kid-friendly backgrounds. So definitely you want to spend some time looking them up, pre-Googling them beforehand. But there's still a chance to ask students, who is it that you're following online? And then looking with them and seeing, what is their background? What is the purpose of their video? What is it you're learning? One of the things I really like from Fact versus Fiction, even though it's really focused on fake news and teaching students about fake news, is the idea that you really want to be teaching students in the context that they're already engaged with on the devices they're already using. Because if you're doing a search online and you're using a phone, that's going to look a lot different than if you're doing it on a computer, on a Chromebook, etc. So I love their idea of, if you've been in elementary education, you're probably familiar with a think aloud, something that you have a book and you're talking about comprehension strategies. Well, take that idea and use it as you are searching on the internet, as you're showing them what you see on a phone, as you watch a YouTube video. And just do that think aloud process. Allow them to see what it is as an adult you're thinking about as you watch a video, as you watch an influencer. Walk them through those comprehension strategies that are geared towards information literacy purposes. So then, of course, we want to engage with our students and help them engage with a global world. This is just one example of 8 dimensions of a global perspective. It's a little bit older, but there's some other ones that are out there that kind of help you think through how we can help students understand where their information is coming from, what kinds of information it's giving them, and then maybe where is it that they're not seeing or learning about. So celebrating Global Media and Information Literacy Week is one way to engage with students. There's a link to that there, which I believe should go to the 2024 Literacy Week if that's something you're interested in. As I mentioned before, when I was doing some research for this, I came across last year's Lely conference. So if you didn't attend that, you can learn a little bit more about playfulness and information literacy. And just another way to engage with students and make information literacy more fun. Sometimes, we just kind of push you need these skills because there's bad people out there. And yes, that's true. But we also want to acknowledge that social media is just kind of fun and that information is fun. And we want students to engage with it in a fun way as well. So, maybe asking students, what does your social media feed think? Does it think you like dogs more or cats? There's easy and fun ways to engage with them about these concepts that don't have to be particularly heavy hitting and news based. etc. And then in just empowering our students. So, as I was mentioning before, you want them to be able to see themselves in a global world. And, it's easy to look at these different influencers and say, well, that's what they're growing up in. They have all these people that they're following that have different kinds of perspectives. But we still have, you know, 2.6 billion people who aren't online. So is what they're seeing on YouTube representative of the real world? We need to make those contexts clear for them. And have them kind of, think through what that might look like. So if I was still working in K-12 school, I would probably put up a poster and say, who is it you're following online? Where do they live in the world? What kinds of perspectives are they giving you? And then once you had that, you would have a chance to have a conversation about, well, what perspectives might you be missing? What could you go and look for? That would give you some more information about some areas of the world or some different types of perspectives that you don't already have. I've seen a lot of talk about this book recently. It's next on my to-read list, so I haven't read it yet, but I wanted to throw it in there because there's a lot of hand-wringing right now about students and how they engage with information and people online, how they engage with their phones, how that's impacting their education. And I think, some of that's not wrong, but this is a good chance for, us as librarians to have the conversation with students about, what do they see as the challenges and benefits of these devices? What is it that they would do to change the way this type of information is shaping the world? And I think that's super important as they grow into adulthood. Just a few other things, the 7 social standards. I love this. It's something that you can share with students. I mean, protect your privacy like you're famous. Who doesn't love that concept, So you can click on that link and it'll take you to the rest of them as well. And there's just a few other ideas about ways to empower students to think about, how information again is shaping them, how people are talking and engaging with social media and information online. A few more resources. Meta literacy is a good one. And then there's so many things about information literacy online. It keeps changing, but these are just a few that were a little bit more recent I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to open up for questions, and I wrote questions on here, but I'm sure many of you probably teach and educate on these things as well. So maybe questions and comments. And I just realized I haven't looked at the chat this whole time. So let's see. I'm going to close this, stop share. Here we are.
I've got you, Amanda. I've got some
Okay,
questions lined up. Thank you so much for that presentation.
thanks.
I do have a couple questions from the chat here. And this is sort of, maybe you're not, consider yourself an expert on this, so we can kind of open it up, but see what you think of this. How can we keep up with the influencers that students are following, especially when we can't access things like TikTok from on campus?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a hard one because even as I was researching this, it's like, it's so specific to your location, I think. Because I think like right now my kid goes to one school and sometimes I go and sub in another just to kind of keep my head in the game a little bit with K-12. And even what he talks about, what they talk about, I mean, some of it's the same, but it's so different and specific because you get, one kid, they say, oh, have you seen, so and so? Let me send it to you. Or the algorithm kind of takes one of them one way and one of them another way. I think it's just asking kids. I think it's asking kids what's out there. Um, if I was sharing this, if I wanted to do a think aloud or if I wanted to really talk about specific influencers, as an educator, I think what I would do is I would go home, I would find that information, I would probably screenshot the video, save the video, make some sort of what do you say, like a little more static presentation that I could say, oh, hey, I just noticed so and so posted this yesterday, where I've already watched it and I've already seen it and nothing's gonna pop up, because that's the challenge of social media for some of us who aren't as TikTok savvy, is like it just kind of keeps scrolling and scrolling and you don't know what you're going to get. So I would make it a little bit easier to manage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's great. Um, this is another sort of general question from our shared notes document, but it's nice to sort of put out. It seems that students are having unfettered access to online content younger and younger, including using social media underage with parental permission. Are there ways to provide some sort of similar instruction or framework for parents to work with their children at home?
Yeah, yeah, that's a hard one. And I'm glad you mentioned like the underage, because I meant to bring that up. Like, you want to be careful if you're sharing stuff with students online. A lot of your students are going to be on social media, but a lot of them aren't. Um, so, I mean, I've definitely done instruction with parents where we've just kind of talked about different things that they can find online. I mean, I know a lot of people, oh, I just sent my kid to YouTube Kids. Well, did you know that's still a challenge? There's still a lot of things on there that no, most people wouldn't consider kids. Um, yeah, I think it's just opening up those conversations and seeing what kind of questions people have. And how, it's going to depend so much on the age of the kid and whether they're looking at like a tablet that's got YouTube, or if the kid's starting to get a phone, or if yeah,
Yeah.
that it's going to be so different and specific, I think, depending
Yeah.
on the age.
Um, okay, so we have another question. This one's for you. Do you find that students are more receptive to the instruction when the topic is influencers versus things like current events?
Um, yeah, probably. I mean, they definitely have more opinions about, I mean, that not that they don't have opinions about current events, but I think, when they think of influencers, I think they put that into that not school category where, oh, this is fun, and versus this is school. But then the skills they need across, both areas. So, I mean, I think obviously you don't want to ignore the here's how to look at current events, here's how to do actual library research, but I think you can start at one end and kind of work with them towards.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
And a
Um,
lot of times influencers will talk about current events as well. So,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah. Um, okay. Any questions? Anyone who wants to ask from a vocal stand?
if anyone has any ideas, I mean, I'm sure many of you have done some things on these.
Yeah, we have a nice little thread going. We have another question popped up. Please forgive me if you've touched on this, but in your opinion, do the young students realize when they're being advertised to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know, right? That's huge. Like this whole like unboxing toys video. I was thankful I managed to keep my kids out of YouTube before. Now they just watch Minecraft videos all day long. Definitely young kids are not realizing that a lot of this stuff is basically advertisements. These influencers are getting sent items to talk about. And I think that's a good conversation to have with kids. Like, why is this person unboxing this thing when they could be unboxing, how did it come to their house? Like, that's a conversation to have, I think. A conversation for older generations. Absolutely.
Yes.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and somebody wants to know, um, I lost it. Our most whoop, high schoolers getting most of their news from social media.
I mean, I think probably a lot of people are. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think it's just high schoolers. I think it's a lot of people. I don't see that question, but yeah.
Yeah, it kind of got buried because everyone's pretty excited, which is great. One of the places that I find to try to keep up on that kind of information is Pew, does a lot of information seeking, um, and of course asking. I find at my high school it's kind of a mix, but a lot of social media for sure is where kids are getting information without even realizing it. Sometimes it's second and third hand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in that Nielsen group, yeah, Pew is good and Nielsen, they both spend a lot of time looking at how people are getting information.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. I think, let's see if we've got any other questions. Okay, but when they say they get it from social media, is it like New York Times, Twitter? Um, yeah, do you want to address that?
Okay, when they say they give, yeah, I mean, I think the waters are just muddy, you know? Like if I said, where am I getting my news? Well, sometimes I go straight to the news site, but a lot of times, it's people that I follow, like I follow the New York Times, I follow different news organizations that are local, So it's like, where is, some of that? And then, of course, the fact that if you aren't subscribed, a lot of times you don't get the full thing. You get the blurb, which is not the whole story. So you don't know necessarily all the details. Um, yeah, that's definitely, it's hard to say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's now information seeking behavior as a whole mishmash.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes the reshares do make it a little bit harder to
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. There is that
this
sense of
information is free.
being able to access, and that's another conversation that sort of, right, that aligns with the framework about being able to access more privileged information or higher level information that's not free.
Hmm. I know I find that. And then also sometimes like I read something, but then it's like it's hard to go back and re-find it. It's like who shared that? Like I want to go double check it, but who was it? Where did it come from? Trying to find it again and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's fun to have this sort of like side conversation